Welcome to Creative Piecemeal Podcast, a podcast for creatives. I'm your host, Tammy Takeishi. Join me for compelling conversations with artists, actors, authors, musicians, and other creatives about the impact of the creative and fine arts in their lives and our ever-changing world. Thank you for listening. Hello, and welcome to Creative Piecemeal Podcast. Today I'm joined by one of my very, very best friends, Catherine Brusk. This is her second appearance on the show, and you may remember her from before, but if not, definitely check out her original appearance from, I think it was the first year of podcasting back in 2021. But she is a Christian romance author. Her first series, the Finding Faith series, follows the Parks family. It is available on Amazon?
Yes, Amazon.
And she has a new series that recently launched. Her book, Forgiving Saint Nick, came out in
November 1st.
November 1st. Also on Amazon. And you can find those in the links in the website. Definitely check her out, support her. She is an indie author. For those of you that don't know, indie authors have to do a lot of marketing. Well, all authors have to do a lot of marketing, but indie authors most especially, as they don't have a team behind them. And anyway, welcome back, Catherine.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, excited to have you on. If you could tell the listeners a little bit more about your books and what to expect.
Yeah, absolutely. So I launched actually in July of 2020 with my debut called What Love Washed Up, and quickly proceeded with the following books in the series. So it goes What Love Washed Up, What Grace Washed Up, What Strength Washed Up, What Hope Washed Up, and then the last but not least is What Faith Washed Up. And it follows pretty closely along with, as Tammy said, the Parks brothers. Really feeds in a lot of big topics. That's one of the things that I like to say that I am not afraid to cover. The first book, What Love Washed Up, covers human trafficking. We have everything from, discovering your worthiness in the world and in Jesus, to marriage and special needs parenting, to lamenting the many emotions that we all carry day to day. And then last but not least, losing a parent. It's been quite the wild ride. Obviously, I had no clue what I was doing when I first launched. It was a miracle I got the book off the ground, but I did. And now we're here today. I just launched my 6th book and the start of a new series called a DGI Romance Collection, which actually follows along with a group of creatives who work for a megachurch in the Kansas City area. And it will follow, again, more big topics. The first book it addresses the patriarchy issue within the church. And then the series will continue. And I promise there are a lot of other big topics that I will be covering in the next 2 books as they will come throughout the next few years, and they will be addressing some of the other big issues that are not addressed in the church like they should be.
One of the things that I love and have always loved about your work since the very beginning is that you do address big, important, serious topics that a lot of people are afraid to bring into the light. And that's one of the reasons you are an indie author, is because you have that freedom and that ability. You're not censored or sanctioned in any way, and you're able to just, get that story out there exactly the way that you want it to be. And so I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's been really eye-opening just comparing traditionally published to indie authors and just the path that traditionally published Christian fiction Christian romance authors are on, due to the controlling nature of the publishing houses. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but there are certain rules and certain restrictions that you're going to find in traditionally published Christian romance, Christian fiction, that you're going to get a lot more gritty of topics and situations when you go into indie authors. And it's just going to end up being a lot more realistic, I feel like anyway, than what you're going to find with traditional publishing nowadays.
Yeah. To reiterate your point, for you and what you write in your journey, indie publishing was the right field for you. But for someone else, it may be traditional publishing or even small press. And I
Mhm.
feel like, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just a matter of where someone finds their home.
Absolutely. Yeah. You have to be able to be surrounded by people who support you. And I haven't had very many people who have disagreed with me as far as what I write about or theologically. I've gotten so much support from so many authors, and readers, of course. Love, love, love my readers. But yeah, you have to find your niche and where you really, really fit in, because if you don't have that and you don't have that support, then yeah, you're just gonna end up flopping. And that's terrible. Nobody wants to flop. So yeah, so just keep trying and keep finding that niche. It's very interesting seeing, I've seen so many authors go from indie to traditional, but I've also seen traditionally published who want more freedom and they're stepping away from publishing companies and going indie. So it's very interesting to just find out what actually works for you individually.
Before we get into all of our fun topics, I was just curious, what is something that you learned in 2023 regarding your writing journey?
Oh, goodness. You know, I second guess myself a lot. And with this latest book that I produced and wrote, I was fairly intimidated by taking a stand that might appear pretty dogmatic to some people, but when it appears that way, in reality, it's actually trying to prove how dogmatic some of Christian theology is, and to point out you can't say it's that dogmatic because here are these other views. So that was actually very intimidating for me to step out in that. And I have had so much support from so many different friends, authors, people who honestly questioned that approach, but then it's amazing what has happened in the world literally like weeks within me publishing my book, for people to be like, oh my goodness, you were right, this isn't a black and white issue, here's so many issues popping up today in real life. And I don't think it's coincidence that it happened that way. So it's been incredibly eye-opening, and just almost kind of just that, whisper of you're on the right path, you're doing the right thing, this is what God has called me to do. That's been really, really good, just from a point of having a little bit more confidence in going about, especially writing this next one, which is an even bigger topic than the first book. So yeah, I'll say, like, it's still very intimidating to write about these big topics, but this last book has definitely really pushed my confidence to a new level about how many people need to hear about these bigger topics.
And if you don't mind me getting personal for a moment, it sounds like doing this work, you said you feel like it is your calling. In reading it and knowing you, I 100% agree with that for sure. Do you feel like your faith has been strengthened through your writing journey?
Oh, absolutely. There are so many times where we're put in circumstances that they fall apart. And that had recently happened to me. I think 2020, let's face it, kicked us all in the pants. But for me, on a personal note, it actually got me out of a situation that I was staying in because it was too hard to let go. 2020 was definitely the kick to get me out of that situation. And it wasn't until I was out of that situation that I realized how unbelievably unhealthy it was for me to stay there. And it really did have such a huge influence over the book I just released, Forgiving Saint Nick. And had I not gotten out of that situation and really been able to look at the whole thing from a brand new perspective, that book wouldn't exist. I had started it, but it had gone nowhere. And man, like, had I not gone through everything the past 3 years, then who knows where I'd be as far as releasing a sixth book. Definitely called to do that, and called to look at different circumstances. And part of being able to do that is sometimes requires God to give you a little kick in the pants to get you out of an unhealthy situation. So yeah, it's been quite a wild 3 years, that's for sure.
I'm so excited for you for where it's all going, and so proud of all of the work you've done.
Thank you.
We're gonna switch gears and get into some of the fun stuff. What is one of your favorite romance books that you read in 2023?
I've got to pull up my hoopla here. Take a look at my most recently borrowed here. I do tend to stick within the realm of Christian fiction when I read, and that is a lot because it's all about also knowing what's out on the market. That way you can actually have a good idea of kind of what works in a book and what doesn't work, depending on how things are going in your own books and what you're actually successful in doing. So this past year, I've honestly been reading a lot on the topic of patriarchy, and then the topic of my next book to come up. So I haven't done a ton as far as fiction. I am a pretty big Bethany Turner fan. She writes clean fiction. She's in the realm of Christian fiction. She's some of those, and some others are just clean fiction. But she recently released a clean fiction called Bryn and Sebastian Hate Each Other, which was stinking hysterical. And I laughed quite a bit. So that was definitely a good one. I am a big Charlie West fan who also writes clean historical fiction. And she actually just recently released her first contemporary fiction called The 50-Year Dream. And it was an excellent one to read about two sisters and one of them finding love. And I really did enjoy it as well.
Nice. I am actually a little bit slow to reading this past year. I have not read as much. I have not consumed as much as I had preferred, but some romances that I did read, in two people come to mind, and they've actually both been on the podcast, but I love them regardless, which is why I invited them on. One is Catherine Center, and I read Hello Stranger and The Bodyguard. She writes, of course, romance that are, and as you know, it's a happier for now, happy ever after
Yes.
endings. And she has, it's like a closed door romances, because she writes so that pretty much anyone can pick up the book, and they're not going to be, they're not going to feel embarrassed or feel like they have to hide the cover or something like that.
Yeah,
so she,
something you can read in public and not feel totally mortified when somebody looks at you.
Of course. And she just writes such heartfelt stories, and many of them have become movies on Netflix, including Happiness for Beginners and The Lost Husband. And then another author who I really enjoy is Allison Ashley, and she writes romance books from like a medical standpoint. So,
Yeah,
maybe
I've read one of hers.
Yeah. So, maybe the person is a nurse, like the main character is a nurse, or the main character is and works in oncology, like lots of different things. And I love that. And one of her more recent books was called Would You Rather? Jumping from that, what are some romance tropes that you love, and romance tropes that are really not your cup of tea?
I will say I don't think I have any that are not my cup of tea when it comes to romance books. Like, yeah, I say this like on my website on the about me section, like you're not going to find one that I'm not going to enjoy. I know a lot of people are very anti love triangle or, whatever. And I love them all. I think the thing for me to make me not enjoy a book is the character realistic? Is it somebody who I can relate to? I've read several romance books actually this past year that I was like, well, I could mention them, but they weren't just fantastic, knock my socks off because I just didn't relate to the character very well. That being said, whereas I like don't have one that I absolutely hate, I will say one that I absolutely love is Enemies to Lovers, which is my most recent book is an Enemies to Lovers. And really, honestly, I think a majority of my books have that spark of maybe not quite enemies, but they certainly dislike each other in the beginning.
There's some animosity there.
Exactly. Like What Love Washed Up, Kip and Jesse, when they first meet, Jesse's like, nope. In What Hope Washed Up, Sarah and Jason, they immediately clash. I just love that banter that you get from Enemies to Lovers. That's just my absolute favorite. That and, the forced proximity, of course, when they are stuck working together or in the same house or, on a work trip together, or whatever it happens to be. I adore the forced proximity because it just makes that fire burn really hot, which is just lots of fun.
Yes. I also really love forced proximity. What's interesting is one of your favorite tropes, enemies to lovers, is one that it's really hard for me to get on board with. And I'm like, how can someone suddenly fall in love with someone that they hated and wanted to throw a box at? Like, I don't get, but like you brought up, it's really about the believability and the authenticity in the characters and the writing. And your books have enemies to lovers, but it's believable. So it doesn't bother me. Like, for that trope, it really has to be done in such a fine line where it's not so much animosity that it's not believable and it's almost like you don't want it to be comical and like, what is this?
Yeah. And I've read books that cover the enemies to lovers trope and it was terrible where like they literally go from like legit hating each other's guts to suddenly like the next page they're like, oh, it was all because I liked you. Like, no, that's not believable. Like it's got to be a slow fall. There's got to be something to change that hatred into, all right, I guess I can stand you, to then a little bit more. It can't just go from like one instant to the other instant. And I think that's what's going to bother anyone is just the fact that it's not written well and the characters don't have that arc. But as long as they have that arc and it makes it believable, then it's definitely one of my favorites.
Yeah. Although I must say, like, I have never seen enemies to lovers in real life, ever. I don't know anyone who's like gotten married where they're like, I couldn't stand this guy. Like, personally speaking, I've never seen that.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if I know of anyone like that. I can't think of any like in real life.
Right? I feel like it
Which
only
is
exists
funny.
in the fictional world.
Yeah. That would be very interesting. So if anyone's listening and you're aware, please drop a comment. That way we can know if this actually happens in real life or not.
That's right. Although I must say, one of my favorite enemies to lovers that's not in book form, it's a movie. The Proposal with Ryan Reynolds and Sandra Bullock. Oh, it's so good.
I love that movie. I mean, can you really go wrong with Ryan Reynolds and Sandra Bullock? Like, no, you just can't.
That actually rolls us so well into the movies one. What are some of your favorite romantic movies?
Well, speaking of Sandra Bullock, my absolute favorite is While You Were Sleeping. It is 100%. I actually just recently over this last Thanksgiving, found out that my husband's aunt had not seen that. And so I insisted that she watch it because I was like, you can't go through your entire life without watching this movie. It is one of my absolute favorites. That you've seen it, right? Pretty sure.
Actually, no.
Oh, Tammy, we can't be friends anymore.
Oh my gosh. I'll put it on my watch list.
It better be like the next movie you watch, because the ice scene, you will know what I'm talking about. The ice scene where they have to walk across the ice. That is like the scene. Like, it doesn't get any better for romance than that scene.
Okay.
Like, it just doesn't. It's so good.
I don't know how I missed that one.
Yeah. That's unacceptable. Like,
I
we gotta pause the
know.
podcast so you can go watch it.
Oh my goodness.
Beep, we will now be taking a break so that Tammy can go watch while you were sleeping.
That's right. Oh my gosh. Yes, I promise. I will officially put it on my watch list.
Yes, you certainly should.
One of my favorites is When Harry Met Sally.
Yes, that is a classic. I do love that one. I think anything kind of set in New York, I just think of like, Sleepless in Seattle. It's just, there's just something really romantic about New York City and being there. Maybe that's because I'm not from New York City and it's really terrible, but I have visited several times and it always seems very romantic.
Yes. It does seem to be like the quintessential place for a lot of romantic movies or books to be set. It's either New York or some sort of small town you've never heard of.
Right. Yeah. Like, well, because I think, let's face it, like Hallmark movies take the take the cake when it comes to little small towns, and the super rich, successful businesswoman comes and falls in love with the flannel clad male. Like, it's just kind of classic.
Exactly. Like, is it even a Hallmark movie if they're not wearing flannel?
I don't think you can claim that it is without the flannel. Like,
that's right. Like, if they're in stripes, it doesn't count.
Yeah, it doesn't count. I will say my husband got a flannel shirt for the first time after our 15 years of marriage, and it works, ladies. I mean, like, something about man and flannel, like.
Oh my goodness. I'd have to think about that. I've never really stopped to consider if I find flannel appealing. You know what I do find appealing are button-up dress shirts with the cuffs rolled up.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. A good blazer with a nice pair of dress shoes and some jeans.
Maybe if you like don't even have the blazer, but you've got the vest on and the short sleeve. Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's just something about it.
Yeah, like that professor look, not gonna lie, I really dig it.
Yeah. It's really easy to fall for like just the simplest looks, or like just the something you do just to like be comfortable, and yet it just ends up being just really sexy.
Yeah.
It's just something about it. Like, I can't explain it. It's just the way the world works.
That's right. It's some sort of a law of the universe.
Yes.
That if a man has rolled up sleeves.
It's like the same concept of like, you either have the guy who sees the girl coming down the stairs in the pretty dress and suddenly he's like, oh my gosh, or he's used to seeing her dressed up and suddenly he sees her in sweatpants with her hair in a messy bun and suddenly she's the most beautiful thing he's ever seen. And it's just so funny how it just follows along with those, like, in every single thing. It's just really funny.
Yes. Although I will also say I do enjoy a very good 3-piece suit.
Yep.
Yep.
And they just make suits so much better now than what they used to. They used to just be really boxy, and terrible. And now suits these days, like, they fit and it works. It just works so much better.
It is lovely. Hats off to all those tailors and fashion designers. Thank you.
They're making it work.
Yes. Bonus points if there's glasses and a book in hand.
Yes, always. because you can't go wrong with a man holding a book.
Very much, very much. Intelligence is so sexy, as is one's love of reading, at least from my perspective.
Yes, agreed. I don't think that you can like be a creative in any sort of sense of the word and not think that that's not, a good priority for the opposite sex.
Yes, yes. I was curious, what is a romance movie that took you by surprise? Like you didn't know if you were going to like it, but you're like, oh, this is so great. I also have to think about that. I'm trying to remember the last one I watched. Like,
Yeah, it kind of cracks me up like what actually qualifies as a romance movie nowadays.
right? Just about
Like,
anything.
what?
Die Hard. Die Hard is everything.
Yes. Well, it is a Christmas movie. So
Well, I'll get back to you on that one.
actually, I read an article recently that I don't remember if I tagged you in it or not, but it was about somebody who studied all the music and it had like so much Christmas music over the regular music that it counted as a Christmas movie because of the amount of Christmas music involved in the soundtrack, which I thought was very interesting.
That is interesting.
I like legit. I'm like, what the heck? Some of these are not romance movies.
I know. I know. I'm like, are you sure?
Like, I don't see. Okay, here, let me click on this 80 best romantic movies and see what I can find.
I don't think I've watched nearly as many romantic movies as I thought.
I know. I can tell you one that I didn't like, which will make me severely unpopular, but
Oh, I can tell you one I didn't like.
what's that?
La La Land.
I just hit that one. I thought that one was okay. I did not like A Star is Born. I know. I wanted to like it so bad. I loved the music. I hated the storyline. They were so toxic for each other. It was terrible.
It made me cry.
What an excuse. I have no excuse.
It made me cry so much. See, the thing is, like, I think that was a horrible question. I'm so sorry. There's not a single movie that I've seen that I didn't think I'd like and then I liked.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I think I always go into romance movies expecting to love it because that's my genre. I really do like everything about it, And so it's really hard to like not enjoy the concept, I guess. But so yeah, that is a hard one. I will say it's a TV show, but it's interesting because looking at it, so if you look on IMDb under romances, it actually includes the TV show You. Have you watched that?
Oh, yes. I've seen a
Like,
couple of seasons. Oh my goodness, it's creepy.
how is that a romance? Like, that's not that's like stalker. Like, and I will say I love the TV show. It's very psychological, like, oh, is he gonna get caught? Like intense edge of your seat stuff, but I would not put it under romance.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
so I guess there's something to be said about thinking that you're going to watch a movie with a certain trope, but then it ends up like not even being in the genre, not being the trope, not, like where it just becomes a disappointment. And not to say like, I mean, You wasn't a disappointment, but if I had gone into it thinking I was going to be watching a romance,
Yeah, really.
I got this like obsessive stalker TV show, like I would have been terrified. So yeah, so there's something has to be said for making sure that you're marketing everything appropriately.
Very true. Yes, which is, why movie trailers are so important.
Yes.
Or
And
even TV show trailers in general.
yes, yeah. One thing I will say with the question of like what's something that you didn't think was very good but then surprised you, there have been movies that I have watched as a teenager, and then since becoming an adult, rewatched and had a much better appreciation for the romance. And I will say one of those was Notting Hill. I had watched it, way back when it first came out, 1999. Just
I
looked it
love
up.
it. It's so good.
So I would have been in high school, watched it, and I can remember thinking like it just wasn't my favorite. It just, it was okay, but it wasn't anything that I really loved. And recently my husband and I, for our 15th wedding anniversary, decided to have people tell us some good movies to watch. We met working at Blockbuster, which is why we decided on this movie thing. We had Julia Roberts as one of the actresses that got chosen. And so we watched a bunch of her movies. And my husband had never seen Notting Hill before. In fact, he hadn't seen a lot of Julia Roberts. We ended up watching a lot of Julia Roberts movies because there were so many that we both hadn't seen. Then there were ones that, he hadn't seen that was just like, how have you gotten through your entire life without seeing this? And Notting Hill was one of those. And I was like, okay, well, I'll watch it again. It was pretty good. And definitely something I thought he should see. But then it really wasn't until this recent watch through that I was like, that is a phenomenal movie and I really like it. So I think depending on life circumstances and what you glean from it can change depending on where you're at in life. And so it'd be interesting, maybe someday I'll have the time, but to go back and reread books that I maybe had a similar opinion on where that wasn't life changing. I'm not going to rate it as a 5, because it didn't change my life. But it'd be interesting to go back and reread and be like, now that I'm in different circumstances, does it hit differently? And do I have a better and greater appreciation for what artistic nature it is?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'm so glad that you love Notting Hill. It's actually one that I loved from the beginning, but I haven't seen it in ages. So
Mm-hmm.
it's one of those that I wouldn't mind rewatching just to see how my take on it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think honestly, the first time I watched it, the character who played Spike, Hugh Grant's roommate, I think I just like so did not like his character that it like turned me off of the movie because he just overall is kind of an uncomfortable character. But after writing and really getting into the minds of different characters, you start to really appreciate those ones that make you uncomfortable or push you out of your comfort zone, as far as even writing, much less actually reading them. And so I think that was really big for me to appreciate the uncomfortableness and accept how, despite the fact it was uncomfortable, it also made for really hilarious situations and appreciate that as an adult versus as a teenager. I'm like, ew, gross. He's wandering around in his underwear. So it's just like different as an adult because you're just like, okay, who cares?
Another interesting thing is the experience of when you're experiencing whatever it is, a work of art, a movie, a book, and almost like you said, where you are in your life when you're experiencing that. Like you could have had a horrible day and you decide to go to the movies and you have high hopes on whatever movie it is, but your day is ruined because your hopes are so high, like whatever,
Yes.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And even when it comes to if you've read a book and you absolutely love that book and they announce a movie and you're so excited to go see the movie and then the movie doesn't live up to the book and it is like heart-wrenching because the potential of what that movie could have been because of the book. And yeah, it's an interesting dynamic when you really step back and you think about preconceived notions that you have going into things and how that's going to influence what you think about it as well.
Is there a romance movie that you've seen the movie, but you have not read the book? For me, it's The Notebook. I love the movie The Notebook, and I purposely will not read the book because I don't want to ruin either experience.
Yes, the same way. I have not read the book. I've seen The Notebook countless times. I'm pretty sure I went and saw it 3 times in the theater. And I will add to that not only The Notebook, but also A Walk to Remember,
Oh yeah.
the Mandy Moore movie. I loved that movie. Showing my age, owned it on VHS. I don't even know how many times I've watched that. And again, is it a Nicholas Sparks too?
It is. It is. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's just one that I'm not going to pick up the book because I just loved the movie so much.
Yep. I'm the same way for both of those movies.
Hmm.
And I mean, it's nothing against Nicholas Sparks. I'm sure he
Yeah.
wrote fantastic books.
Oh, I'm sure.
However,
But why would I ruin the movie?
exactly. Exactly. And then the book gets ruined because you've got movie like
Right.
memories, you know?
Yes, I will say so. I grew up in a very conservative household, so I did not actually read the Harry Potter books until I was an adult. And this was after I had met my husband, who loved Harry Potter and like read the books as they came out and went in costume to go see the movies. You know,
Well,
big
learning
nerd.
something
I
new
love him to
about
death.
him.
Yes. And so I had seen the movies and loved the movies and then read the books. And you immediately place who you've seen in the movies as the characters. Now, of course, they did such a wildly good job on the Harry Potter movies that I don't think that's like a bad case to compare it to. I think, like that worked out really, really well, but there are definitely situations out there where I wish I had been able to see that in my imagination before it came out. I will use as an example The Hunger Games. Sorry, we're getting off romance here, but like I saw again all the movies before I read the Hunger Games series. Read that, of course, I'm always picturing Jennifer Lawrence as the main character, which is great. But I have read the song, what's
Ballad of
the
Songbirds and Snakes.
Songbirds and Snakes? Yeah, I have read that one, and I am like dragging my feet going to go see the movie because I'm afraid that it's not going to live up to my expectation, because I went in to Songbird and Snakes going, I'm not going to like his character, like I'm not going to be able, because I know who he turns into in the Hunger Games, and yet I ended up falling in love with him and just begging things to work. That is how good Suzanne Collins is. She's a phenomenal writer, because I was just like begging for things to work out right, even though I know where it goes in the Hunger Games. But I'm really kind of dragging my feet about seeing the movie because I'm afraid I'm just not going to be in love with it like I was the book.
What's interesting is I had an opposite for Hunger Games. I read the books first, and then I saw the movies, and I'm like, it's pretty good. They're not bad.
Yeah.
But they missed so much, obviously.
Yes.
She packs a lot in there. And similarly with the Harry Potter movies, they were well done, but you can't take J.K. Rowling's natural charm that she writes, with no pun intended, and translate that to the screen.
Yes.
Like, it is just impossible.
Yes.
And you only get that in the written word.
Yes, 100%. Written word, and I will say Jim Dale reads the audiobooks for Harry Potter.
Oh.
And he does a phenomenal job. He does all the character voices and the whole bit, and it is worth listening to the entire series at least once if you have a really, really long road trip or whatever. We love Jim Dale's audiobooks. That's like we get in the car and the kids are like, turn on Harry Potter. And we listen to that quite a bit just because everyone loves the stories, and we love listening to Jim Dale's audiobook version of it.
You bring up a good point there about voice. Not just author voice, but actual, like, a person's voice. It can be so compelling to not only a story, but to attraction in the romance realm.
Yes, 100%.
You know, as a writer, both of us write, you published and I just write for the hell of it. Um, I find myself like kind of falling in love with my characters when I write them.
Yeah, it's interesting in the series, in my first series that's completely out. I actually wrote the second book first. So What Grace Washed Up is the book that I wrote first, but chronologically, What Love Washed Up comes first when it comes to series in chronological order. People have asked me like, okay, so, which male character is the one that like you wrote who's like your ultimate like book boyfriend, like, whatever you want to call it. So it's interesting because, whereas I wrote Ben Parks first in What Grace Washed Up, he ended up being the second book because, I'd written a little bit of Kip in What Grace Washed Up. There are several scenes where Kip and his wife Jessie are in the second book. Man, that gets super confusing. Sorry, everyone. But so I had an idea of who he was. And honestly, when I was writing him, he was like, couldn't be taken seriously. Like, oh my goodness, he's the class clown. And it really wasn't until I was fully writing him in What Love that things just clicked. And I commonly laugh and just say I have the biggest crush on Kip Parks because it's 100% true. Like, you end up falling in love with these characters that you're writing, and they become a part of, they are a part of who you are. Yeah, it's really easy to get very caught up in your characters and develop who they are, to the point where if you end up putting an actor to their person in your head, then you commonly will accidentally call the actor the name of your character on a regular basis. I've never done that, guys. I've never done that.
No, never. Neither of us.
Never. Nope. And then you proceed to watch 15 seasons of a show that because you end up really liking that actor. Yeah. Never done that.
I feel you there with some other actors who shall remain nameless at the moment.
Yes, yeah. May or may not have been on the podcast. Who knows?
Right, exactly. As everyone scrolls through the hundreds and something episodes.
Exactly. Who are they talking about?
Yeah. Oh goodness. Yeah, for me, I know you've read everything I've written, and there were definitely some characters that I wouldn't say are like carbon copies of each other. Like they definitely were, but I have a type.
Yes, 100%. I think there's been numerous times where I've commented on a couple of the different stories where I'm like, this is so and so from the story, and you need to change it.
That's right. You're like, this is so and so, just in a different outfit with a different name.
Exactly.
Fix it.
But otherwise, they're all the same.
That's right.
Which is really, I think, honestly, is as a writer, that's like one of my biggest fears is making sure I don't rewrite the same characters, because that's not something you want to end up doing, where they feel like they're reading the same person over and over and over again. And that's very hard to, it has to be more than body language and looks. The characters have to think differently, and that's going to be different than the way you think, especially if you rely a lot on your own experiences to help you write. That's a big thing to really keep an eye on. I will say there at one point, my mom was reading and helping me edit. Oh, I forget which book it was, but I think it was What Strength Washed Up, and the main character's Amanda, and she definitely commented, she's like, this is Bree. And I was like, dang it. Like, I gotta go and I gotta rethink how she would react to this. That way it doesn't seem like I'm rewriting Bree, and instead I make Amanda her own separate character.
Well, at least you've got different male love interests / main characters. You're not like me with a slight copy paste problem.
I have a wide range of of interests in the male gender, I guess. I don't have one particular set type.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if it's good or bad that it's just like I have one type and that's it.
I think it is slightly harmful when it comes to trying to write somebody who's very different than your type because you want them to be your type. Because if you can fall for your type, then somebody who's very much like you can also fall for it. But I think it's important to remember that every single person has different things and different types. I will say, like, I've never been physically attracted to like the really blonde, really blonde, like almost white blonde hair. And so I've never written a character with that because I struggle to find that physically attractive. And I will say, like, one thing that I feel like has helped me immensely as a writer is I actually, when I first graduated high school, I was pretty convinced that I was going to be an actress. And so I started my college career in college for 5 years. It seems like a career. Um, Started it thinking that I was going to go into acting. I will never forget a friend of mine was helping me work on a part, and I was playing opposite of a young man who I was not physically attracted to at all, yet I'm acting as his love interest. And so my friend who was helping me was like, well, you need to find and pick something out about this person that you are physically attracted to. That way you can use it. And so I always kind of resort back to that advice of like, okay, just because I'm not physically attracted to it doesn't mean that somebody else is. And let me at least find something that I can, use and create physically on this person that I can find physically attractive, in my mind, and use that in my writing. That way I have a purpose for the female character to fall in love with. I always kind of come back to that advice when trying to write outside my box, which my box is pretty big, but for someone who doesn't have a big box, that's also a good piece of advice.
Yeah. Yeah. Very, very good advice there. And something that I think transcends looks, which is of course part of attraction and part of what writers and filmmakers try to get across, is certain characteristics and traits that are just so much deeper than that.
Yes.
And kindness is certainly a top tier one for sure.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, I don't think anyone can actually, when reading a book where it's very black and white, literally, when you're seeing a person be unkind, you can immediately point out that as a red flag, versus when you're in person, I think it's a lot harder. And why abusive situations happen is because that's, it's very easy to create excuses, but when it's literally in words, it's a lot harder to create those excuses. And so you can call out bad characteristics much easier than in real life.
I really love stories that, not just yours, but any stories where the characters are authentic and you're able to notice those things or whatever the lesson is to be learned and apply it to your own life and in ways that, for betterment of your own life. I mean, obviously some of the reasons we read as humans is to gain knowledge, but you can gain so much knowledge from a fiction book, from a romance book, because it models appropriate and inappropriate or healthy and unhealthy, whatever words you want to use, ways of caring for yourself and caring for others.
Absolutely. One of my favorite things that I actually ran across this year, and I wish I knew who to give credit to, but it was a meme. So who knows? But it was a definition. It said, I'm no longer going to be referring to fiction and nonfiction in their particular forms. Reading nonfiction is learning through facts. Reading fiction is learning through imagination. And that really struck me as being so powerful because I feel like there's a division for a lot of people where they say, oh, well, I don't read fiction because it's just all made up. Or, well, I don't read nonfiction because I just really can't stand the boring facts. And there are so many things to be gleaned from both sides, just depending on how your brain learns. And you know what? As long as you're reading, who cares? Like we're reading and we're learning, and that's the important thing. And I will say, even the books that I read where it's like is very fluffy, it's just meant to be entertaining, you can typically still take something away from it. And that's really encouraging. Just to know that, there's something out there for everyone.
I love that. Before we wrap up, is there anything else you would like to share with our listeners?
One thing that I'm very interested to see, a big thing when it comes to romance books is the level of spice, which is, that term has quickly taken over in the writing world of, are you keeping everything closed door? Is it completely clean? But when it comes down to, almost every single book in the romance scene has at least a kiss, and it's really interesting because in real life, I mean, let's face it, real life, the first kisses can be a little awkward. And it's really funny because I feel like that's not something that is addressed in romance books really well. So I guess I have a question for you. And is, do you recall ever reading a book where that first kiss wasn't magical, where it wasn't fireworks? I really, really want to quote, but I don't know the full quote, but that old 90s movie, It Takes Two, with Christy Alley
Oh
and
yeah, something about
Mary
the
Kate.
baseball.
Yeah, I was like over the fence,
Hit it out of the
like
park.
fireworks,
Yeah.
I don't remember the full quote, but it's an excellent quote.
Oh, that is an
But it's
excellent
just
quote.
so funny that most kisses end up like that, when in reality, most first kisses are a little awkward. You don't really know what the person's going to do. And maybe your teeth kind of scrape together and
Right.
you're
And it's
kind of,
like, how do we all have noses?
right. Yeah. Suddenly everyone has noses and like, what do I do with my hands? And so, I think that's something I'm actually planning on kind of, I'm going to try to attempt is, how do you recover to move on to the point where the kissing actually gets good? Because that's what we all have to do in real life.
Oh,
So, and I just don't ever recall reading a book where it wasn't just this magic moment.
right. Yeah. I mean, and if that has occurred in a book that I've read, I certainly don't remember. And it's not because it's not a memorable or enjoyable book. It's just I can't recall.
Yeah.
Like
Because same goes for me. I just cannot recall ever reading a book where it was truthful about the awkwardness of first kisses,
yeah.
regardless of whether you love the person and have figured that out or not.
Yeah. Although I will say I feel like movies capture that a little more realistically,
Yes.
and TV shows a little bit,
Yes. Yeah, a little bit, depending on the circumstances. I feel like, again, it's just not quite as good when it comes to the romance genre of being truthful about the awkwardness of it all.
Yeah, that is a good thing to think about, because with fiction there is a certain level of suspended reality, suspended belief, so that you can have that magic. And
Mhm.
you know, I guess first kisses happen to be one of the magical things.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely very, I don't know, something to take on as a writer, I feel like. I don't know. Can I consider that like a big topic in my next book? Takes on the awkwardness of first kiss, first kisses,
That'd be really cute.
especially in those like friends to lovers tropes where, yeah, you know each other super, super well. So how do you suddenly make that move into the physical realm from emotionally knowing each other really, really, really well? Now I've made our podcast really awkward.
Yes.
No one wants to talk about this, Kathy. Stop.
The listeners are like, what are they talking about? Kathy knows all my dark secrets.
I've never had an awkward kiss ever. That's just not realistic. Okay.
Oh goodness. Yes. Yeah, I don't have anything else to say on that topic, but I will say, with Valentine's Day being around the corner, something that I learned about gift giving is that it's not even about the gift. It's not even about how well you know the person. It can be a friend, a lover, a new partner, someone you've been with for 30 million years. It's about listening to that person's wants, that person's needs, and then figuring out, if you are a gift-giving couple, what that might look like for that other person. Whether the gift is your partner makes breakfast for you on Valentine's Day, or your partner selects concert tickets because you've always wanted to see such and such band and they happen to be in town soon. Like, it's really about listening to that person's wants and needs and the thought behind it versus the actual gift
Yes.
itself.
Yeah. That's something, even just after leaving, recently, having gone through Christmas. It's funny, the things that you have to teach children. I have 2 kids myself, and that's something that, in taking them to go buy a Christmas gift for their dad, it's like, oh, we want to go to the toy aisle. Like, no, like, let's think about something that daddy would actually like and not what you want daddy to have. And yeah, there's definitely a learning curve. And I will say, like, even after 15 years of marriage, there's still some things both my husband and I, get very wrong for each other. And then there are times where, man, we really do hit it out of the park and we impress each other and ourselves. And, it's all sorts of fun stuff. So I will say, like, I guess that's one thing, is like, don't give up just because you might get a gift wrong. Is keep listening and keep, make yourself a note, like, Christmas next year, and write down any of those ideas that, after you've used your listening skills, to actually, write down those ideas to be able to follow through with.
Excellent. Well, Kathy, thank you so much for being on the show. Always a pleasure to have you on.
Same. It was great.
And listeners, please check the show notes for links of where you can learn more about Kathy and purchase her books. Again, so important to support authors across, not just indie authors but just authors in general, and all those indie bookstores as well. Super important. Yeah, that's my little spiel about books. But as always, thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to the podcast. Like the show? Have a question? Stop by the Facebook and Instagram pages. Links are in the show notes, or search for Creative Piecemeal Podcast on social media and click follow for all the latest.